You know how when you're a child and you're told to do something and you kind of halfway do it and you know that you're halfway doing it? Okay, so that was my last video. I played it a little coy and made ADD sound like it was just um, having a really bad memory. So I need to get real. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do it by telling you some stories. So, having ADD, um, one of the things that's difficult is activating or getting started on an activity, anything, that you need your mental processing for. And it's as if you were in a car and you didn't have the key. You know how to steer, you know how to work the pedals, but you can't do anything because you can't start the car. You cannot get the car started. And until you get the car started, there's nothing you can do. That's often what it's like to have ADD. I talked about paying a lot of late fees, but there are often more dire consequences to being late with things. For example, getting your insurance canceled. So I paid my insurance late one too many times, and USAA canceled me. That very good insurance that I was eligible for because my father was military canceled me with a quickness. So I have no insurance. I'm in my early 20s and I don't know what to do. And I can't get other insurance. My credit is bad. They don't really care about your driving record, it's all about your credit report. So my credit was bad. I had just been canceled and I don't have any insurance. So I was very good with this HP printer that I had at the time. So I made my own stickers for the license plate. And everything was fine until the packing tape that I used to affix the stickers to my license plate started to come loose. And the police were behind me, and apparently the sticker that I had created, I don't know if it was the month sticker or the date, but one of them started to come loose and was kind of flapping. So he pulled me over and he went to the back of my car, looked at the license plate, and realized that these were fraudulent registration stickers. This is a fairly serious offense. So they immediately impounded my car. I had to call my mother to come and get me. And because it's a fairly serious offense, I ended up having to hire an attorney so that I wouldn't lose my driving rights altogether to represent me when I had the court date. So that's probably a better example of the type of consequences that can come from not being able to handle your affairs because of your ADD. So that's one example. Another example, when I was in school, this was my final school. It took me 11 years and 4 schools to get my bachelor's degree. That's another story. So I was on my final school. I was working full time at Smithsonian Magazine in Washington, D.C., and I was living in D.C. at the time. And I told you before that I often wouldn't be able to get my work done until it was the last minute, and adrenaline was what kicked in and enabled me to finally get my work completed. So I was in the evening weekend program at Trinity College, now Trinity University in Washington. They're big time now, but they will forever be Trinity College to me. And Trinity was the only school in the area that had an evening weekend program. It was a women's school run by the Sisters of Notre Dame, and this evening weekend program catered to women who worked, especially who worked in the federal government or other companies surrounding the federal government in DC. So it gave women, especially in entry level positions, secretarial positions, a chance to get a bachelor's degree and move up, because the government is very strict about education requirements in the GS scale. So I'm going to Trinity, I'm working full time, and I would go to Trinity at night. And I had a Monday, Wednesday, Friday night class, and the class would be from 7 to 9. And often we would have papers due on Friday. Well, I was almost never able to finish my assignments, like I said, on time. So Friday would come, I'd go to class, everybody would turn their paper in, and I wouldn't have my paper completed. So after class, at 9, I would go back to the office, because computers were expensive then, and I didn't have my own computer, so I relied on my office computer. I would go back to work after my class that ended at 9, and I would be up all night, and all of a sudden everything is kicking in, and I'm able to get the research done, organize my thoughts, organize all of my work, and get the paper completed in the wee hours of the morning. So this was in the 90s, and there was a sweet spot in the 90s where we had technology, but technology wasn't so omnipresent that we didn't still have things like landlines. Everybody still had a landline. And during this time, you used to be able to take somebody's phone number. So all my professors, when they gave us the syllabus at the beginning of the semester, they would have their number on the syllabus. Well, you would be able to do something called a people search. I would take the phone number and put it in the people search online, and it would bring back, and it would show the name and the address of my professor. It was their home address. And more often than not, my professors would live in Northern Virginia, but they might live 30 miles away from school in DC. So we also had at the time MapQuest. So I was able to put the address in MapQuest, map out my route, set out in my car. It'd be 2, 3 in the morning, and I would drive out to Virginia, turn off the main road onto some cobblestone lane, and have to drive back up in the cut to get to the house way off the main road. And this would be my professor's house, and it would be 3 in the morning, and I would be driving very slow and have the headlights turned off, and creep up to the house and put the car in park. My paper would be in an envelope with a very sincerely written letter about why the paper was late, and please accept my paper. And I would leave it on the porch or inside the screen door. I would get back in my car, slowly back out down the lane, get back to the main road, and go back home in time to take a shower and get up and go to class on Saturday morning. So the professor wakes up, they see a paper on their porch, they realize that one of their students from Trinity College in DC has hunted them down in Virginia, found their house, driven out to their house, and delivered a paper. And either they were terrified or somewhat impressed, but more often than not, they accepted my paper. Sometimes I would lose a letter grade. It was a good paper, so I would end up getting a B on the paper if they dropped it down a letter grade, if they accepted it. And I did this time and time again, made my forays into Maryland and Virginia, and sometimes in other parts of DC, to hunt down my professors to turn in late papers, hoping that it would be close enough to the deadline that they would accept it. Now, this is ridiculous. And I know what the consequences are of not turning in a paper on time. But it doesn't matter if you know the consequences. You can't make your brain do what your brain can't do. And when you have ADD, it can be so difficult to get started, to do the work, until you're panicked And that takes a toll on the body when you're constantly working in a state of panic and a state of crisis, and you do that year after year after year. It takes a toll on your body. And I believe this is why things came to a head for me when I turned 40. I did graduate school in 1 year. It was an accelerated program. And that was such a difficult task. I think it broke my brain. And that's why I finally hit that wall when I turned 40 the next year, because of what I went through to get through that master's program when I was 39. So hopefully that gives you, those are just a couple of examples of the type of crises that I was in with respect to ADD. So jumping forward, I turn 40, I finally get this diagnosis, and I finally get on some medication. And man, I had clarity. All of a sudden, I was able to complete tasks, and I lived in an apartment at the time. And the apartment was taken over by new management. And as people moved out, they started upgrading the apartments. They were painting the cabinets and installing ceiling fans and did all kinds of really nice stuff to these apartments. Well, I thought, I want an upgraded apartment too. And just because, I've been living here and I'm staying here, why shouldn't I have an upgraded apartment too? So I started duplicating the upgrades that they were making in the apartments. Next thing you know, I'm at Home Depot, Lowe's, and Walmart. I'm buying paint. I'm buying brushes. I'm buying rollers. I'm buying plastic tarps. I'm buying tape. I'm buying knobs for the cabinets in the kitchen that didn't have knobs. I'm buying 2 colors of paint because they had the doors one color and the frames another color. I'm removing all of the doors on the kitchen cabinets so that I can paint them. It's fall and winter. I'm painting outside and it's cold. Well, I painted the living room. I painted the kitchen. I painted the dining room. They had an accent wall, so I got chocolate colored paint and I did a chocolate accent wall in the living room. I had a flat screen TV, and the early days of flat screen TVs, they were flat in the front, but they weren't flat in the back. They were big and they were heavy. So I'm buying a bracket to mount the TV to the wall. I got a stud finder. I'm finding studs. I'm putting the bracket up. Now, this is a 2-person job putting this TV up, but I'm 1 person and I'm holding this heavy TV and I'm reaching around the back and I'm getting it set up and I'm doing it. So next thing you know, I said, oh, well, they put in these ceiling fans with the light kit. I want a ceiling fan over my dining room table. So next thing you know, we didn't have YouTube videos. I got a book, and the book just said electrical. And it taught me some basic stuff. I've got I found the switch on the breaker box, so I thought. There was a little mishap early on, but we won't get into that. It was just some sparks, no flames. And I took the switch plate off the wall, and I have to find the wires that go to the fixture over the dining room table. I figured all that out. I take the fixture down. I have to mount a bracket to the ceiling joist up in the ceiling so that the ceiling fan will be sturdy and it won't shake around. I get the ceiling fan mounted. Now I'm going from a 1 switch plate to a 2 switch, because I need 1 switch for the fan part and 1 switch for the light part. I never got that quite figured out, so there were some wires sticking out, and I just had the 1 switch, and I had to work the ceiling fan with the remote control. So next I move on to the bathroom, and I decide I'm going to paint the bathroom lavender. I'm going to change out all the gold 1980s doorknobs, and I'm going to change the fixture in the sink. Well, to change the sink fixture, you have to take the entire sink out. So next thing you know, I've bought a pipe wrench, and I have another book that's just called Plumbing from the same publisher is the one that said electrical. And I'm up under the sink and I'm taking the sink apart so I can change the fixture. I paint the whole bathroom. I change out all the doorknobs. The lavender was hideous. It was the worst thing ever. It was supposed to be lavender with silver accents. So now I have to repaint the whole bathroom, and I do like a goldenrod. So now the accents aren't going to match, so I had to change those too. And I want you to understand that this is happening at 1, 2, 3, 4 a.m. is when I'm doing these projects, okay? It gets to be 5 a.m. I'm taking a shower at some point, and I'm going to work. And at this point, I had an assignment, and my supervisors were in DC. I'm living in Denver now. And my supervisors were in the DC office, so I didn't have a lot of direct supervision. Anyway, I just know that I would find myself at work, and I would just leave at like 3 and come home and get back to doing my projects. Now, on one hand, I'm excited because the first time in my life, I'm actually able to complete projects. I'm doing creative things. I've never been creative. That's one part of my brain. Another part of my brain says, this is crazy. And it was. Enough that I didn't tell anybody what was going on. Normally you say, well, what did you do this weekend? Oh, I did some home improvement projects. I said nothing. So I still have appointments with my my very good therapist that I had finally found. And I'm just telling her about, I'm able to concentrate and complete projects. And there must have been something in what I said that tipped her off. Because all of a sudden, she started asking better questions. And she started asking more questions. And more questions. And I had to come clean about the fact that I was spending thousands of dollars and the fact that I was working at all hours and not really sleeping. And remember, this is an apartment. I don't own this place. I'm making upgrades in someone else's apartment. The apartment that someone else owns is what I mean. It's my apartment, but I don't own this place. Anyway, she finally says to me these fateful words. I think you have bipolar. What? Seriously? I find out that I have ADD, and then several months later, you're going to tell me you think I have bipolar? Because what I have experienced is a manic episode. I had never had a manic episode before. I knew that I had had bouts of depression, but I had never had a manic episode before. So the great apartment remodel was the big tip-off that I have what's called a comorbid condition. Comorbid just means existing at the same time. So very often, if you have ADD, you might have a comorbid condition. It could be something like anxiety disorder or bipolar or OCD or anything. And it's not unusual to have more than one condition. Now, bipolar is not the type of subject that you bring up at cocktail parties. You don't come in talking about, hey, I got bipolar. ADD is a little more palatable, and I will often share that, but very rarely do I tell people that I have bipolar. Very few people in my life know that I have bipolar. And so what happened when I got the ADD diagnosis, it gave me a lens to look back at my whole life and think about how my life might have been different if I had been diagnosed earlier and gotten therapy and medication earlier. I might have gotten married. I might have had kids. Anything. I might have finished school in a reasonable number of years and done who knows what. So now I have a new diagnosis of bipolar. And so this is yet another lens that I have to look back through at my life. Now, like I said, I hadn't had a manic episode before, but I certainly had had depressive episodes. And I came to realize that a lot of it was centered around, strangely enough, the weather. So when I looked back at my 11-year course to an undergrad degree, very often it was spring and summer when I would be on the dean's list, and fall and winter when I would end up with incompletes. I am very sensitive to sunlight or the lack of sunlight, and I guess it's generally called seasonal affective disorder. Um, but I looked back at my history and realized that it tracked, that that's when I had the most problem. It exacerbated my ADD, and when during those months when there was more sunshine, because at that time I was living on the East Coast when I was in school, and moving from Colorado to the East Coast when I was a junior in high school, it was a big change. And it might sound trite, but the loss of sunshine, because on the East Coast it'll be 95 degrees and overcast, and and then when I first went away to school, I went to Yukon, I went to Connecticut, which, has even darker winter months, and I really struggled. So I start to put together the picture of my life through the lens of these diagnoses and realize, man, my life would have been so much different if I had known these things about myself. And I just wanted to come back and give a more honest depiction of both ADD and bipolar, my comorbid conditions, because doing the tips and tricks was nice, but it wasn't completely honest. And if for anybody who's suffering with ADD, I just want to be clear about how devastating and difficult a condition it can be, with or without bipolar. And so I wanted to come back and share those two stories about the fake registrations and stalking my professors, and the apartment remodeling, just to give you an idea of some of the things that I've been through. When I talk about where I am now, it's important to understand where I've come from, so that it all really makes sense. So I pledge to be more honest going forward so I don't have to come back and correct. And there's more stories to come. There is plenty to tell. I've got some stories. Thanks. Bye bye.